The man running across the lobby was not the kind of man who ran anywhere. Owen Barr was 47 years old, the COO of Vantage Partners, a person whose entire professional existence depended on projecting the impression that nothing had ever surprised him. He had not run since his daughter's soccer game 3 years ago. He ran now. His tie was over his shoulder. His glasses were in his fist. His face was the color of copy paper left out in rain. And his voice arrived before he did. "Step back from that chair." Carl Webb's hands were on the push handles of a wheelchair. Carl was a big man, careful with his movements, 6 years at Vantage and 18 before that in the Army. His hands came off the handles like they had touched something hot. "She owns 54% of this company." The lobby went silent, not quiet, silent. The waterfall murmured on. The espresso machine ticked. 30 people in that room inhaled together and forgot to exhale. At the center of all of it sat a woman in a wheelchair who had not moved. Her hands rested on her lap. Her folder of documents was on her knees. Her face held the expression of someone watching a storm she had predicted finally arrive. That was 9:28 in the morning on a Monday. Let me take you back 3 hours. The city was still gray when Adele Okafor sat in front of her closet at 6:41 a.m., deciding who she wanted to be that day. She had 2 options. On the left side hung the armor, charcoal suits cut precisely for her, silk blouses in cream and deep blue, the clothes that made bankers and attorneys sit up a little straighter when she wheeled into a room. She had bought each piece deliberately, over years, because the world had taught her early that some battles were easier to enter well-dressed. On the right side hung an old gray jacket, soft at the elbows. The zipper pull had been replaced twice. She had bought it from a second-hand shop 12 years ago and had never been able to throw it away because it was the jacket she had been wearing the last time she felt ordinary. She reached right. 10 years ago, Adele had been the sharpest analyst at a financial firm downtown. 38 years old, first in her family to finish a graduate degree, the woman whose calls were consistently right when everyone else was hedging. She had a reputation for finding value where the market saw noise. Her colleagues called her methodical. Her clients called her indispensable. Then came the accident. A rainy Wednesday evening in October, a delivery truck that ran a red light, and 11 hours in surgery. She woke up to a doctor who spoke carefully, and to a silence that came later, when colleagues stopped texting back, and the firm's calls changed from personal to administrative, and then stopped entirely. She took her settlement and her savings and built something new. A loan from a kitchen table with a laptop and a legal pad she filled front and back, and then turned sideways and filled in the margins. She studied companies no one believed in. She placed careful bets on people the market had written off. One right call became 5. 5 became a portfolio that, after 5 years, managed assets worth more than the firm that had sent her flowers, and then forgotten her name. She never gave interviews. She never posted photographs. Okafor Capital lived in wire transfers and legal filings, not in magazine profiles. Bankers knew the name. Almost none of them knew the face behind it. Last Tuesday, in a conference room with Richard Holt, the retiring chairman of Vantage Partners, she had signed the largest single transaction of her career, 54% controlling interest. The wire had cleared. The announcement was scheduled for 10 a.m. that same Monday morning, which gave her a window. One Monday morning where she could walk through the front door of a building she now owned without anyone knowing who she was. Her grandmother had told her once that you could learn everything real about a place by watching how it treated a stranger at the door. Adele wanted to see Vantage through those eyes before her name went on the wall. She zipped the old gray jacket, tucked her leather folder against her hip, and rolled out into the morning wind. The cold came off the water in the distance, sharp and damp. Salt trucks rumbled past. A bus pulled away from the corner stop. Her gloved hands worked the wheels in the rhythm she had been perfecting for 5 years, block by block, until the tower rose in front of her. Vantage Partners occupied 35 floors of glass and steel, brass letters above the revolving doors, a waterfall wall visible through the lobby windows, the light inside falling warm and gold across polished stone floors. From outside, it looked like the inside of something expensive and certain. She found the access ramp on the side of the building, A chrome advertising placard had been placed directly at its base. Bold lettering, "Success begins at the top floor." She gripped the placard's cold edge with both hands and dragged it clear, inch by inch. Her shoulders burned before she had crossed 6 feet of marble. Her gloves were damp from the effort. Nobody held the door. The man in the tan wool coat who came through the revolving entrance while she was still on the ramp glanced down at her wheel and stepped over it, already looking at his phone. He kept walking. She got through the door herself. The lobby was warm and smelled of espresso and the particular mineral scent of stone that never quite dries. 40 feet overhead, a chandelier scattered light across the floor like coins dropped from a height. The waterfall caught it and broke it into moving pieces on the wall. She rolled toward the front desk. Her wheels left 2 faint lines across the polished floor. Behind the desk sat Sylvia Marsh. 9 years with Vantage, head of lobby reception. A woman who managed her post with the specific efficiency of someone who had decided long ago that gatekeeping was its own art form. She arranged fresh white flowers beside her monitor every morning at 8 sharp. She knew every senior partner by coffee preference. She also ran the lobby the way some people run a velvet rope, warmth for the people she recognized, a cold shoulder for the ones she didn't, and nothing in between. When she glanced up and saw Adele moving across the floor, something in her expression settled. Not curiosity, recognition of a category. She did not stand. She did not smile. Adele stopped at the desk. The counter came nearly to her chin. "Good morning," Adele said. "Adele Okafor. I have a 9:30 meeting on the 28th floor." Sylvia looked at her jacket, at her wet wheels, at the worn leather of her folder. "The charitable giving office is in the building 2 blocks over," Sylvia said. Her voice was pleasant, the pleasantness of someone who has said a version of this sentence many times and expects it to work quickly. "We don't handle community outreach in this lobby. I'm not here for that. I have a 9:30 meeting. Please check the visitor list. Okafor, Okafor. Sylvia looked at her manicure. "I'm not pulling up the system for a walk-in," she said. "Appointments for the executive floors are confirmed in advance through the corporate office. If someone invited you, they'd have given you a direct contact number. They gave me an authorization card." Adele reached into her folder and placed a cream-colored card on the counter. "Vantage Partners letterhead, 28th floor, 9:30 a.m. Richard Holt's office had couriered it to her on Friday. She had to stretch upward to reach the counter edge. Sylvia picked up the card with 2 fingers, turned it over, set it face down on the marble, and patted it twice. "Anyone with a printer can make one of these," she said. "We had someone last month with a building pass that looked completely legitimate, walked right up to the 4th floor." She paused, just enough. "The point is that I'm here to protect this firm." From across the lobby, near the espresso bar, Priya Nair was watching. Priya was 26, 2 years working the lobby cafe, currently 19 credit hours from finishing her degree. She had watched Sylvia run this desk for the full 2 years and had developed a precise understanding of what it looked like when Sylvia was performing for her own benefit versus actually doing her job. This was the first kind. Something else was catching her attention too. The woman at the desk wasn't reacting the way people usually did when Sylvia dismissed them. No raised voice, no flustered apology, no gathering of things to leave. She just sat there, still, watching Sylvia the way you watch a situation you already understand. Priya filled a glass with cold water, came around the bar, and crouched next to the wheelchair. "Here you go," she said quietly. "It was cold out this morning." "Thank you." The woman took the glass. Her hands were steady. From behind the desk, "Priya." Sylvia's voice landed flat, the way a ruler lands on a desk. "The cafe counter is your station. I shouldn't have to explain that twice." Priya stood, gave the woman a small look, and returned to the bar. But she did not go far. She stayed at the end of the counter. She was already thinking about who she could contact upstairs. Now here's the thing. I need to pause for 1 second. Because Priya Nair had been written up 11 times in the past 2 years. 11. And if you look at the dates on those write-ups, every single one of them falls within 48 hours of Priya being kind to someone that Sylvia had decided didn't belong in that lobby. A man who stuttered. A woman with a service dog. A young man in interview clothes who had arrived 40 minutes early and sat quietly waiting to be called 11 times. She handed that woman a glass of water anyway. And that is the whole story right there if you know where to look. Adele set the water glass on the counter's lower ledge and looked up at Sylvia. I'd like you to call Richard Holt's office to confirm. 2 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Something flickered behind Sylvia's eyes. Holt was the chairman. His name was not nothing, but 11 years at a desk had taught her a simple equation. The cost of insulting someone who turned out to be a nobody was 0. And everything about this woman read as nobody. The jacket, the wet wheels, the card placed upward like a petition. She leaned slightly over the counter. Men like Mr. Holt say, "Come by to many people," she said. Her voice dropped half a register, taking on the warmth of something that was actually cold. At events, at charity dinners. They mean it the way people say we should catch up sometime. If you take those things literally, that is not this office's problem. Call his office, Adele said again. 2 minutes. I'm protecting this firm from people who walk in off the street with printed cards and stories. That is my job. A pause. Some of us earn what we have. The lobby was listening now. Not all of it, but enough. 2 young associates by the elevators had stopped their conversation. A man on one of the leather sofas had lowered his newspaper. An older woman near the window, Mrs. Eaton, had turned her head. Adele looked at Sylvia for a long moment. She did not get angry. Anger, she had learned over years of rooms like this one, was a currency. Spend it carelessly and you bought nothing. She slid the card back toward herself. I'd like your name, she said, for my records. Sylvia blinked. Then she laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that comes from being caught off guard by something so unexpected it reads as funny. My name? And who exactly will you be giving that to? She reached up and unpinned the gold nameplate from her blouse and held it up between 2 fingers like a small flag. Sylvia Marsh. Sylvia. Marsh with an H. She set it on the counter. Make sure you get it right. Spelling matters, Adele said, especially on formal documents. Something cold moved through Sylvia at that. She couldn't have said why. She pushed past it. At the far end of the lobby, Brenda Oakes had stepped out from her position behind the desk and moved to stand beside Sylvia. Brenda was the assistant receptionist, 5 years with the firm, and in those 5 years, she and Sylvia had developed the specific working relationship of 2 people who had agreed, without ever discussing it, to apply the same standards to the same kinds of people. When Sylvia's expression said something, Brenda's posture confirmed it. Now Brenda had her phone out. She was angling it toward the desk. She told Sylvia quietly that she was documenting the incident for security purposes. She was not. She was live streaming. The viewer count on her screen climbed in small, steady increments. Okay, wait. I have to stop here. Because I want you to really see what's happening in this lobby. It's not one person having a bad morning. It's a system. 2 people who have been doing this together for years. One talks. One documents. One sets the standard. One enforces it. That is what systemic bias actually looks like in the real world. It's not one villain. It's a practice that 2 people have made into a routine. And 30 people in that lobby watched it happen in real time and said nothing. Almost nothing. Raymond Cross had been sitting in the lobby chairs for 20 minutes, waiting to meet with one of the firm's partners. He was 62 years old, a former financial sector executive, and when Adele rolled through the entrance and stopped at the door for 4 seconds to read the room, something about it had caught his attention. He had seen that kind of deliberate attention in only a handful of people in his career. It was the look of someone who analyzed situations for a living. He had thought, I know that look. He had thought, I might know that person. He had looked down at his phone. He was still looking at his phone when Sylvia said, Some of us earn what we have. Raymond put the phone in his pocket. He stood up. He took 3 steps toward the desk, and then he stopped. The meeting upstairs was important. He had already rescheduled it once. His niece had just texted asking if he could pick her up after school today because her car was in the shop. He stood there for a count of 4 seconds, looking at the woman at the desk and the phone in his pocket, and all the reasons he had for not making this someone else's situation. He sat back down, and he would carry that 4 seconds for a long time afterward. Sylvia had made a decision. She came around the front of the desk, her heels audible on the marble, and held out her hand toward Adele's folder. "Let's just see what you actually have in there," she said. Her voice had taken on the performative quality of a woman who knew she had an audience. "Since we're doing this." "That belongs to me," Adele said. Sylvia lifted the folder from her lap and upended it. Papers burst across the marble. Pages fanned out across 12 feet of polished floor, slipping under the sofas, skidding against the base of the reception desk. A pen rolled across the floor and stopped against the toe of Carl Webb's boot. The lobby went very still. One page came to rest face up near the center of the floor. Heavy cream stock, embossed at the top. The words were large enough to read from a distance. Vantage Partners Holdings, Share Transfer Agreement, Confidential. Nobody read it. The document that could have ended the entire incident in 15 seconds lay in the middle of the floor while 30 people stood around it looking at each other. The man in the tan coat, who had stepped over Adele's wheel on the ramp outside and was now waiting for an elevator, glanced at the paper, glanced at his phone, and looked away. Some people are never the main character in any story they enter, not because they lack the ability, but because they never decide to be. Brenda Oakes kept filming. Adele looked at the papers spread across 30 feet of marble. For a moment she did not move. It was 9:19 in the morning. She had a meeting in 11 minutes on the 28th floor. She had a folder full of documents that a stranger had just scattered across a public lobby. Her shoulders ached from the ramp. Her gloves were still damp. And 30 people were watching her with the particular quality of attention that people give to something they have decided is entertainment. She could have told them who she was right then. She had a tablet in her bag. 3 taps, and she could have shown them the share transfer agreement, the board portal, the email from Richard Holt sent last Wednesday welcoming her as the firm's new controlling partner. She could have made Sylvia Marsh's world collapse in 30 seconds and walked, with complete justification, to the executive elevator. She did not. Because that was not the point of the morning. She had come here to see how this lobby treated a stranger. It had answered that question. Every additional minute was just more answer to the same question, and she was going to let it finish answering before she said a word. She put her hands on her wheels and began to collect her documents, one at a time. One at a time, she leaned out of her chair for each page, her shoulders screaming from the ramp earlier, her gloves still damp. She kept her face entirely smooth. She had stopped letting strangers see her hurt a long time ago, but the lean was visible. The reach was visible. Every one of those 30 people could see exactly what it cost her to pick up each page off the floor. Not one of them moved. Except Priya. She was across the lobby in seconds, already crouching, gathering pages. Sylvia's voice came like a thrown object. "Touch one sheet and I'm writing you up before noon." Priya froze. 2 pages in her hand. She looked at Adele. "Put them where I can reach them," Adele said quietly. "Then go back to your station. You've already done the important part." Priya set the pages on the floor within reach, then stood. Before she walked away, she crouched close and spoke low, facing away from the desk. "I texted Nina. She's Mr. Holt's assistant. She comes to the bar at 8:45 every morning. She always answers." Adele's hands paused on the wheels. One breath. "Then we wait," she said. "Go protect your job." Sylvia had been watching this exchange with the growing irritation of a performer whose show was being upstaged by the audience. She pressed a button on her desk phone. "Carl," she said, "I need you at the front." Carl Webb crossed the lobby. He was 6'2", broad across the shoulders, with the measured walk of someone who had learned in a different context that how you moved in a situation determined how the situation moved. He took one look at the scene, the scattered papers, the woman collecting them one by one, the folder on the marble, and his instincts said, "This is not a disturbance. This is a person." He said to Sylvia quietly, "What exactly happened here?" Sylvia gave him the version she had already assembled in her head. The woman had refused to leave. She had been causing a disturbance for 20 minutes. She had refused to follow lobby protocols. Carl looked at Adele. She had just placed the last page back in her folder and closed it. "Is that accurate?" he asked her. "I came in at 9:05, she said. "I have a 9:30 appointment. I asked to have one phone call made to confirm it. That's the only thing I've asked for." Carl looked at Sylvia. "That's a reasonable request," he said. "One call." "Carl," Sylvia's voice shifted into something private, the register she used when she needed him to understand what was actually at stake. "If we ring the chairman's office during a board meeting because of a walk-in, that comes back on both of us. You have 5 months until your retirement date." He held very still. Brenda stepped closer. She kept her voice low. "She's already been escalating for 20 minutes, Carl. You saw it yourself." We all saw it. He hadn't seen it, but he wasn't sure enough of that to say so, and 5 months was a specific number. It was the number of a granddaughter who thought his uniform made him a real-life superhero. It was the number of a pension that had taken 2 decades to build. Real talk. If you were Carl Webb at that moment, what would you do? I'm not asking you to judge him. I'm asking you to actually put yourself there. 5 months. Everything you've worked for. 2 people telling you one story. 1 woman sitting quietly telling you another. What would you do? Carl walked behind the wheelchair. His hands found the push handles. "Ma'am," he said. "I need to ask you to come with me, Carl." Adele did not raise her voice. She did not turn around. "I want you to remember that you asked me politely. That is going to matter." He kept his hands on the handles. And then the elevator chimed, the doors opened on the far side of the lobby, and Owen Barr came out of them already running. His tie was over his shoulder. His glasses were in his fist, not on his face, because he had been reading the security feed on his tablet all the way down in the elevator and hadn't thought to put them back on. Nina, Richard Holt's assistant, had texted her from a cafe contact. Nina had pulled up the visitor registry. Nina had seen the share transfer documentation that had been cross-referenced into the system last Tuesday, and Nina had walked into Holt's office mid-sentence and placed her phone on the conference table. Holt had said 4 words, "Get Owen down there." Owen had been moving since before the elevator doors opened. He crossed the lobby in 8 seconds. He was already talking. "Step back from that chair." Carl's hands came off the handles. Owen reached the desk, bent over it with both palms flat, breathing hard. He straightened up. He turned to face the lobby. "This is Adele Okafor. She is the founder of Okafor Capital. As of last Tuesday, she is the majority shareholder and controlling partner of Vantage Partners." He swallowed. "My direct supervisor, and the supervisor of everyone in this building." 30 people did the math at the same time. 54%. Not a client, not a guest, the owner. The biggest chair in the building belonged to the woman they had been trying to roll out the door. Brenda's phone slipped out of her hand and landed face down on the marble. Nobody looked at it. From the sofa by the window, Raymond Cross stood up. He crossed the lobby slowly and stopped a few feet from the wheelchair. He looked at Adele. He did not speak for a moment. "I recognized you when you came in," he said. "We worked in the same sector 15 years ago. I knew who you were." He stopped. "I sat down anyway." He looked at her directly. "I owe you an apology for that." Adele studied him. "You're standing up now," she said. "That counts too." Owen had recovered enough to continue. He looked at Sylvia, who had not moved. Her mouth had opened twice, and each time produced nothing. 3 security camera angles, he said. "I watched all of them on the way down." He looked at the scattered papers that Adele had gathered back into her folder, at the card that had been placed face down on the counter, and never read. All 3. Sylvia's hand moved to the marble surface of the counter, steadying herself. Carl stepped forward. He stood in front of Adele's wheelchair, not behind it, and looked down at her. "Ma'am," his voice came out rough, "I owe you an apology. I should have made the call. 1 phone call. That was all it was." Adele looked up at him. "You asked me politely," she said, "and your hands came off that chair the moment you heard the truth. Both things are true, Carl. Both of them will be remembered." He nodded once. His jaw moved. He walked back toward his post, and he did not look at Sylvia or Brenda on the way. Owen turned to Adele. "The board is upstairs. They've been waiting." He stopped himself. Started again. "There is no version of this sentence that makes what happened okay." "No," Adele agreed. "There isn't." She looked at Owen steadily. "The document that has my name on it is still in my folder. I collected it off the floor myself." Owen flinched. "Let's go," he said. She turned her chair toward the elevators. As she passed the center of the lobby, she paused. She looked back at the front desk. Sylvia was still standing behind it. Her nameplate was still on the counter right where she had set it. She was looking at it. "Sylvia Marsh," Adele said. "Sylvia." She let it land. "Spelling matters, especially on documents." She rolled toward the executive elevator. The lobby parted in front of her. "Bro, I have no words for that moment. I genuinely don't." Because she had every right to say 10 other things. She had every right to be loud. She had every right to make that woman feel exactly the size of what she had done. And she said 7 words that were going to mean 100 different things to 100 different people watching. That is a kind of power that cannot be manufactured. You either have it or you don't. The boardroom on the 28th floor went silent when the elevator opened. 12 members of the board of directors stood when she came in. It was easy to stand now. Everyone could manage it suddenly. Richard Holt came around the table first. He was 68, silver-haired, the kind of tan that came from years of working and vacationing in warm places. This morning his expression held something she had not expected from a man of his position: genuine shame. He took her hand in both of his. "Adele," he said, "I sold you controlling interest in this company. I had no idea I was selling you a lobby that operated like that." "You didn't sell me the lobby, Richard." She moved past him toward the head of the table. "You sold me the right to fix it." She sat down. She asked it to pull the camera feeds from 9:05 to 9:28, all 3 angles, on the wall screen. 12 of the most powerful people in the firm watched their own front desk in silence for 23 minutes. They watched the access ramp blocked by an advertising placard. They watched the authorization card turned face down without being read. They heard some of us earn what we have in clear lobby audio. They watched the folder upended, the papers across the floor, and their new majority owner leaning out of her wheelchair to collect them, 1 page at a time, while 30 people stood around her and did nothing. The general counsel had her notepad open and was writing at speed. One director had his hand pressed over his mouth. 3 people did not watch the screen. They watched Adele watching the screen. They watched her face as she sat through 23 minutes of footage that showed her being told she did not belong. Her property thrown across the floor, a man's hands on her wheelchair. They watched her face through all of it. Her face did not move. Not once. Not when the audio played back the words directed at her. Not when the camera showed the papers fanning across the marble. Not when Carl Webb's hands closed around the push handles. She sat with her hands folded and she watched, and her expression was the expression of someone reviewing a document they already knew the contents of. The director next to the general counsel leaned over and whispered something. The general counsel shook her head without looking up from her notepad. Whatever he had said, she was not going to agree with it out loud. When the screen went dark, Adele let the silence sit for a moment. Then she folded her hands. "I'm not going to open our partnership with a lecture," she said. "The footage already delivered it. Here's what happens next." She looked around the table. "She didn't need to know who I was," Adele said. "She needed to treat me like a person. The first one cost nothing. The second one costs nothing. She couldn't manage either." She laid it out plainly. Sylvia Marsh was suspended effective immediately, pending formal review. Brenda Oakes, whose personal live stream of the incident had violated both client privacy policy and company conduct standards, was terminated before the end of the business day. The formal review would take however long it needed to take, and it would be done correctly. The review, when it concluded 11 days later, found what careful investigations often find: not one bad morning, but a pattern. 4 complaints against Sylvia in 5 years, each buried by a supervisor who had since retired. 11 write-ups issued to Priya Nair, every single one dated within 48 hours of Priya, extending basic courtesy to someone Sylvia had frozen out. The review board named the pattern in writing. They used the word systemic. Sylvia was terminated for cause. In the room where she was told, she said, "I was doing what that desk has always done. The only difference is that this particular person turned out to own the building." It was the most accurate sentence she had spoken all morning. It was also recorded in full by the HR director sitting across from her. Some admissions are confessions. That one was both. Adele declined to pursue personal legal action. The board's general counsel confirmed she had grounds, and grounds were an understatement. She declined anyway. "A lawsuit gets me a number," she said at the next board meeting. "I don't need a number. I need the next person who comes through that door in a second-hand jacket to be treated like a human being. Legal settlements don't do that. Training does. Design does. Attention does." She funded the Open Door initiative with $1.8 million of the firm's own operating budget. Every client-facing employee in the company went through real training sessions, not webinars. Real sessions with real people, telling real stories. The access ramp outside the building was widened and fitted with a heating element so ice never formed on it. The front desk was rebuilt with a lower wing on one side, so that a visitor in a wheelchair could meet a receptionist at eye level. Within 1 year, 12% of all new front-of-house hires at every Vantage office in the country would be people with disabilities. The lobby was not the same building anymore. Priya Nair left the espresso bar in October. She started as Director of Guest Experience the same week she completed her degree, at a salary 2.5 times what she had been making. Her first official act in the new role was to frame a photograph and hang it on the wall behind the front desk. It showed a glass of cold water sitting on a marble floor beside the wheel of a chair. Carl Webb kept his job. The review board's notes were clear. He had been given false information by 2 colleagues. He had asked the visitor for her name politely. He had stepped back immediately when he heard the truth. And he had told the review board everything he knew without hesitation and without a union representative present. He became the person who briefed new security staff on their first day. His speech never changed. Someday, he would tell them, "Someone is going to walk in here looking like nobody at all. Treat everybody like today might be that day." Raymond Cross submitted a written witness statement to the formal review. At the end of it, he wrote one paragraph that was not required by the process. He wrote that he had recognized Adele Okafor when she entered the lobby, that he had sat down instead of speaking, and that he was submitting the statement in part to say so in a place that would be on record. Adele received a copy. She wrote back on plain notepaper, "What you wrote took something too. Thank you for it." 6 months later, on another Monday morning, snow was coming off the water again. Adele had been in the building since 7:40. She had an 8 o'clock call with a portfolio company in another time zone and had come in early rather than take it from home. The lobby was quiet at that hour, just the overnight security wrapping up their rounds and the first wave of building staff beginning theirs. She had rolled across the lobby herself, the new lower section of the desk where no one was sitting yet, the photograph already hung on the wall behind it. The woman in the photograph was not identifiable, just a glass of cold water on a marble floor beside the wheel of a chair. But everyone on the staff knew the story, because it was in the new hire orientation now, in the section titled, "What We're Building Here." She had taken the executive elevator to the 28th floor, made her call, answered 11 emails, reviewed a term sheet for a company in which she was considering a seed investment. Ordinary morning. At 9:05, she glanced at the lobby feed in the corner of her monitor. The lobby of Vantage Partners looked almost the same. Same waterfall, same chandelier, same 35 floors above the avenue, almost the same. The access ramp was wider now, clear of ice, clear of advertising placards, clear of everything except morning light. The front desk curved lower on the left side, like a hand held open. Behind it sat Layla, hired through the Open Door initiative, who used a motorized chair and had a smile that did not sort people before it arrived. At 9:05, the side door opened, and a woman came through it slowly, leaning on a cane, snow on the shoulders of a coat that had been mended at the elbow. She looked up at the chandelier, the way people look at cathedrals, briefly and a little sideways, as if she was not entirely sure she was allowed. Layla waved her over before she could hesitate longer. "Good morning. Come get warm. What can we do for you today?" The woman explained, apologizing as she went, that she had a small pension account, and she knew it wasn't much, and she didn't want to take up anyone's time. "You're on our list," Layla said, already at the keyboard. "Can I get you something warm while you wait?" The chai is pretty good. 2 minutes later, the woman sat by the waterfall, both hands around a warm cup, snow melting off her boots onto marble that had survived worse. Nobody filmed her. Nobody watched her cross the floor. Nobody tracked the path of her cane. 30 floors up, Adele Okafor watched the lobby feed on the corner of her monitor some mornings, not looking for problems, watching the experiment run. Behind her desk sat two things: a framed photograph, a glass of cold water on a marble floor, and a cream-colored authorization card mounted face-up under glass in a small frame, the card that had spent a Monday morning placed face-down on a counter by someone who never bothered to read it. She kept both where she could see them. People sometimes asked her whether she thought about the woman at that desk, whether she was angry, whether she wished she had handled it differently. She always gave the same answer. "I think about the ramp," she said. "People like that exist because systems like that allow them. I couldn't fix her. I could fix the system." The deal that had made her the majority owner of Vantage Partners had been worth a number that newspapers printed with enthusiasm. But if you asked anyone who was standing in that lobby on that Monday morning what the real story was, they would not give you that number. They would tell you about a woman who was told she did not belong in a building she already owned. And then they would tell you what she built with it afterward. Because the loudest answer to that kind of morning is not a lawsuit, and it is not a viral moment, and it is not a firing, it is a wider ramp, a lower counter. A stranger with a cane being handed something warm before anyone thinks to ask what she is worth. That's the whole story. If it hit you somewhere, leave a comment. Tell me about a time you held the door open when it would have been easier to keep walking. Or tell me about someone who did that for you. I want to hear those. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that you never know who is coming through the door. And subscribe, because the next one is already waiting, and it starts in a place no one expects. The most important thing you will do today might cost you nothing at all. It might just be holding the door.